create and edit a 3D model. In this video, we'll use extrude, fillet, revolve, and identify timeline elements. In Fusion 360, we want to carry on with our first upload CAD design. We've already created 2 sketches in this design, and we now want to explore creating solid geometry from them. So the first thing that we want to explore is using sketch 3, which was our center diameter circle, to create an extrude. In order to do this, we're going to go to the Create menu and select Extrude, or use the shortcut E on the keyboard. The first thing that we need to do is determine the type. For extrude, we can create a solid extrude with a closed profile, or we can create a thin extrude, which is a thin wall extrusion with an open or a closed profile. For this example, let's use the thin extrude. Then we can select our sketch profile and begin dragging this up. Once we begin dragging, note that we have several different options for where this profile begins, where it's going to end, its total distance, and even a taper angle. For our example, we're going to change the distance value to 10. Be careful not to hit the Enter key because it'll automatically OK this dialog. I'm going to change the wall thickness to 5 millimeters, noting that it's changing it on the inside. We can also change it to the outside, or based on the center of our selected profile. For this example, we're going to be using side 1. We want to join it to the existing solid geometry, and we'll say OK. If we expand our bodies folder, note that we have body 1, which means that we've combined our thin extrude with the original geometry. Next, let's take a look at creating additional sketches and additional solid geometry. I want to create a sketch on the side face by selecting it and creating a sketch. Next, I want to use my line tool to begin at this upper edge, begin dragging this down until I get a dashed line around the midpoint, and then drag this back to the bottom edge. Using our constraints, we're going to select equal, making both of these lines equal. Then our dimension tool, we're going to dimension the distance from this point to this vertical line at 15 millimeters. The next thing we're going to do is go to our line tool and add a vertical line between the midpoint of the upper horizontal edge down to the origin. We're going to hit Escape, and then we'll finish our sketch. We're going to explore another Create tool called the Revolve. The Revolve will allow us to select a closed or open profile. Then we can select an axis of revolution, and we can either add, remove, intersect, or create an entirely new body. In this case, we're going to select Join, and we're going to add this to our original solid body. I don't want to go a full 360 degrees, so I'm going to manually enter a value of 180. Note that this starts at our sketch plane, and it goes 180 degrees to the other side. We're going to select OK to join these two together. And now we've added an additional solid body to the original existing body. Still, we have just a single body 1. So now we've taken a look at creating an extrude as well as a revolve. And these are just basic examples. But let's also take a look at different ways in which we can modify the geometry. By selecting Modify, we can do things like add rounded or tapered corners. We're going to start by selecting Fillet. On the sharp revolved corner, we're going to select the fillet, and we're going to begin by dragging this edge in until we get to a full round. Notice that this is 17.5 millimeters, and that's going to be fine. We'll select OK. The next thing that we can do is we can select other tools, such as Press Pull. Now, Press Pull is a direct modeling tool, but it allows us to select specific geometry, and then we can carry this revolve into the rest of the geometry. Even though the original revolve had a sharp edge, using the Press Pull tool allows us to update the design based on that fillet. We can repeat the process by using our right-click marking menu and selecting Repeat Press Pull on the other side. We can pull this in, carrying the geometry all the way into our design, noting that at certain points, it's going to begin to remove material, and it just simply depends on the geometry we're working with, how it's going to behave. Sometimes zooming in will allow us to get a finer resolution, or we may need to manually enter a value, in this case, 20.5 millimeters. So now you can see that we've made some adjustments to the design. Let's navigate back to a home view and let's take a look at the timeline to see what's been done. We have the original sketch and the original extrude that created the first body. We then began to add additional sketches. We played around with sketch 2, and then we added sketch 3, which eventually became our thin extrude. Sketch 4 was the basis for our revolve, and then we added a fillet, and we used press pull to offset faces. At any point in time, we can roll back the end of the timeline marker, noting that there are some differences that happen when we use direct modeling tools as opposed to going back and adjusting original features. For example, the press pull tool ended up modifying the original revolve by changing the total degree of revolution. If we go back and edit that feature, you can see it's 210 degrees now instead of 180. If we set it to 360, it gives us a full revolve, and you can see that it's peeking through on the back side here. If I say OK and I modify that feature in the timeline, as we go forward and we add things like the fillet, and we go to our last offset face, notice that it's now giving us a warning. And that's because edges or selections that were used in that original creation are no longer valid. In some cases, we can right-click and review the warning, make adjustments to the feature, but in other cases, such as this one where we completely remove that original face, we're going to go ahead and delete it. So the timeline gives us lots of flexibility and many different options when we are creating sketches or different features on our designs. Remember that we can always go back and adjust these, change when they happen, and make adjustments to their position. Another important thing to note is every time we save a design, we're creating a new version of that design. At any point in time, we can always go back to older versions and recreate them as a new current version or save them as a new design altogether. It's important that you play around with creating basic sketches and features in Fusion 360. And once you feel comfortable with the process of creating a new sketch and creating some basic sketch entities, go ahead and move on to the next video.